I'm not a drummer. I'm also not a recording engineer. My formal training is in woodwinds and music history. Still, as with home plumbing repair, I like to dabble in areas I probably should leave to the experts, but I don't. Which is both how I came to own this odd assortment of percussion gear that doesn't really constitute a drum kit, and why I'm now donating it to a local high school. Before we go any further, and as much as it pains me to do this, I'm going to give a quick click all the buttons spiel. My channel is starting to get some traction, and hitting certain subscriber thresholds apparently unlocks mysterious superpowers. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe and like buttons, and let's see what happens. Okay, enough of that. Introduction. 20 plus years ago, I owned an original Yamaha DT Express electronic drum kit. Back then, electronic drum kits had limited functionality and cheesy sound. And, unless you were willing to pay multiple thousands of dollars, they had solid, rubber-coated heads. They did not feel at all like playing the real thing, and they were really noisy. Okay, not as noisy as acoustic drums, but much less musical sounding to anyone who was within earshot while you played through headphones. Anyway, that Yamaha kit survived a couple of cross-country moves with me in the early 2000s, but after spending a decade disassembled in my basement, I decided to sell it rather than move it the 2 miles to my current house. Eventually, in this house, I did set up a makeshift music studio, the space you see me in all of my videos, and at the same time, I decided I wanted to learn how to mic acoustic drums. The problem was, I still didn't really have the space or the budget for a full drum kit, so I settled for cobbling together a few pieces that I could easily tuck into a corner when I wasn't using them. Another problem is, they're cheap. They don't sound all that great, and, well, like a viral infection, my interest in learning how to mic them effectively kind of ran its course. Which brings me to today. I'm taking this odd assortment of gear to the high school and unboxing the replacement, an Alesis Nitro Max electronic drum kit. A lot of instruments really stand the test of time. The Gibson Les Paul, the Fender Precision Bass, the Stradivarius Violin. But electronic drum kits, not so much. I paid $1,000 in year $2,000 for that DT Express kit. That's equivalent to about $1,800 today. And if you really want one, you can find a complete DT Express kit used on Reverb for around $300, or just the brain for about $80. This Alesis kit, with mesh heads and a much better, albeit more cheaply constructed brain, sells new for only $400, or in my case $360, since I got a demo unit from Sweetwater. So the price is a winner, but how does it compare for playability and sound? Let's find out. After the unboxing, of course. Unboxing. This is not a typical unboxing. Before I take apart the package, I kind of need to take apart the room. And if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you know it's not even really a room. I'm planning something more permanent, but we're just starting the 1 year that both of our kids are in college at the same time. Parenting pro tip: if you see college in the future, have your kids at least 4 years apart. Anyway, for now, I just need to restructure the space a bit. It's an unfinished basement in a 112-year-old house in Minnesota in August. So, yeah, there are dead bugs everywhere, and probably some mouse droppings. It's a good idea once a year to do a thorough cleaning. With that out of the way, literally, it's time to dive into the box and see what this kit is all about. This was a demo unit, so while all of the packaging is present, parts are not necessarily in the correct bags, and some of the connecting pieces are already connected, in ways that don't align with the diagrams in the assembly instructions. So there was a little bit of trial and error as I put everything together, but all told it only took about an hour to get up and running. One thing another video mentioned was that the arm for the snare drum pad is a bit weak, especially when holding the 10-inch snare the current unit ships with. Apparently, earlier versions included an 8-inch snare, matching the 8-inch tom pads. I realized as I was putting things together that there's some subjectivity here. You don't have to follow the instructions. I found that I could swap the snare onto the supported arm that's supposed to hold the brain and the hi-hat, and I put the brain and the hi-hat on the suspended arm meant for the snare. This could potentially cause the leg of the rack to get in the way of the leg of, me, but I found it wasn't too hard to position everything so the setup works. Now to try it out. How will I use it? There are 2 completely different ways you can use this kit. You can play one of the 48 built-in kits, each of which has a lot of flexibility for modifying the sounds. Or you can use it with a DAW as a specialized MIDI controller. I already knew going in that I'd mainly be doing the latter. I expected most of the built-in sounds to be kinda cheesy, and while they're much better than the sounds of my Yamaha DT Express from 2 decades ago, they are still kind of cheesy. I'm a pretty big fan of the software drum kits that come with Logic. I think they sound a lot better and are a lot more usable than the Alesis built-in kits. But more importantly, the interface for customizing them is more scrutable. Scrutable? Is that actually a word? There was no red squiggly line under it as I typed the script, so I guess so. Now, where was I? Oh yes, I was demonstrating how bad my attention span is, which is why I struggle with interfaces like the one on this control unit. That, and the better sounds, are the reasons I intend to mostly use Logic. So I tracked down a cable with USB-B, what century is this, and plugged the Nitro Max into my Mac. I added a new drum track with the drum kit I plan to use for the demo song in this video, and I was up and running immediately. I'm pleased to say, it just works. That is, until it doesn't. I knew the basics would work. The triggers are mapped to the right sounds, and the dynamics respond to how hard I hit the pads. So far, so good. There are two main problems, both of which I also expected. First, the relative sensitivity of the different triggers is inconsistent. The kick drum trigger is extremely sensitive. It's very hard not to max out the volume on it. Contrast that with the cymbal triggers, especially the hi-hat, where it's almost impossible to max out, or even to get a fairly loud response. The snare is also a bit light, and the toms are kind of heavy. The second problem is that a few effects on the Alesis kit aren't mapped to the right MIDI note numbers for Logic. Specifically here, I'm talking about the choke on the crash cymbal and the half-open effect on the hi-hat pedal. The crash choke is what it is. It just doesn't choke. The issue with the hi-hat is a bit more of a problem. If you have the pedal partially depressed, it's not just that the open-close sound is all or nothing, it's just literally nothing. With the pedal in a midway position, the hi-hat pad doesn't trigger any sound. That's because it's sending data for a MIDI note that isn't mapped to any sound in Logic. Again, this is only when using the kit as a MIDI controller. If you're playing the built-in sounds, both the half-open hi-hat and the crash choke work great. Fortunately, these problems are solvable. Unfortunately, it requires you to do something I generally avoid. Read the f***ing manual. Anyway, enough of my yakking, let's boogie. Please excuse my rudimentary skills. Sound demos. On second thought, I don't really want to do this. You don't really want me to do this. Plenty of other YouTubers who are actually skilled drummers have demoed this kit already. And honestly, I'm never going to use the built-in sounds. Both because I don't really like the way they sound, and because I want the flexibility of editing my performances as MIDI tracks in Logic. So let's just wrap things up with my real-world use case, playing the Alesis Nitro Max as a specialized MIDI controller for Logic drum kits. But first, a quick pros and cons list. Pro. Great price for the quality you get. Mesh heads give a fairly realistic drum feel. Light, sturdy frame that's easy to move but stays in place while you play. Plug-and-play MIDI, mostly. Con. The built-in sounds are a bit overcooked. The rubber cymbal pads aren't as nice as the mesh drum heads. The module interface requires referencing the owner's manual to understand. The MIDI mappings don't all match the general MIDI and V-drum options Logic supports. Conclusion. So that's my take on the Alesis Nitro Max drum kit. Overall, I think this is a great electronic drum kit for the price, especially if you can get a discount like I did with the Sweetwater demo unit. It's great especially if you want to play something approximating the feel of a full acoustic drum kit, but need it to be quieter and easier to store. It's ideal for learning and practice, but also works great for recording if you can get past some of the quirks of MIDI. Now, let's hear it in the context of a full arrangement. By the way, this song will be included on my new album of originals, Into the Void, which I'm hoping to have finished by the end of the year. Watch for it on Bandcamp and all of the streaming services. Thanks for watching.